welcome to a new episode about diet myths. Today we will be talking about GMOs or GMFs, which are abbreviations for genetically modified foods or genetically modified organisms. But I would refer to them most of the time as GMOs because this is the common word of choice. So what are GMOs? And are you consuming GMOs?
What is a GMO? Well, it's an organism that's been genetically modified. This means scientists combine the DNA of one or more organisms for some specific genetic feature. Usually this entails engineering plants with toxic bacteria that kill bugs that try to eat the genetically modified plant. Currently, up to 88% of corn grown in the US is genetically modified, 91% of soybeans and 88% of cotton are GMO crops as well. These raw foods are then widely used in food production processes. Nearly 3 of every 4 processed foods contains at least one GMO ingredient. It's almost impossible to avoid products containing GMOs. Everything from soda and juice to canned tuna, breakfast cereal, even milk, and delicious bacon can be genetically modified. Currently, though, GMO products sit camouflaged on the store shelf. Consumers have no way of knowing if the food they are eating is genetically modified frankenfood or not. If GMO labeling was, however, legally mandated, consumers would have the power to choose for themselves. Because after all, you do have the right to know what's in your food.
Well, we can't really tell because you'll know later why we cannot always tell if we're consuming GMOs, but they are genetically modified foods. That means it's a food that has added genes from another product, another crop, which alters the DNA to improve qualities of this plant or this crop. It's commonly found in corn, alfalfa, cotton, canola, soybeans. So these are the crops that are commonly genetically modified, but there are many more out there in the market. So for example, you're eating a tomato that is brighter and you see a lighter tomato. This may be potentially genetically modified by adding the gene from another product that would brighten the color. Or if you're eating the seedless grapes or seedless watermelon, for example, it possibly is genetically modified by adding a trait from another plant to improve the quality or to make it more convenient or more appealing for people. Also, there are products that are genetically modified or crops that are genetically modified for improving the yield of the crop. That is, for example, if the plant needs a lot of water to grow and we have droughts or lack of water in the area, they genetically modify the seeds or the plant and use the seeds to make it use less water so we won't have less of this product. So keep tuned with us and we'll be talking soon about the myths that come with genetically modified foods. Welcome back to the second segment of Diet Myths, and we're talking today about GMOs that are genetically modified foods. So one of the common myths that why the big fuss about genetically modified foods? They have been around for over thousands of years. Well, this is a myth. Selective breeding of plants or vegetables and fruit has been there for thousands of years. It has been happening naturally, pollen grains falling from one to another, or even farmers doing that. But to modify it in a lab, isolating a gene from one product and adding it to another crop, has hit the market since 1996, so it has not been out there for thousands of years. So that's myth number 1.
Genetically modified crops are plants that have been created by adding new genes using methods of gene technology. Most plant crops grown today have been created by breeding. Breeding achieves introduction of new traits into existing crop lines by crossing them with other lines of the same crop that have a desired trait. During initial stages of breeding, all genes of parental lines are recombined in random order. Because resulting plants are quite a mix, both genetically and phenotypically, they are back-crossed to one of the parents and then back-crossed again several times, until the original genotype of the parent is restored to a large degree. Now think of the time it takes to do all the back-crossing. On average, it takes about 10 generations or 5 years of back-crossing to develop a new variety of wheat by conventional breeding methods. Breeding a new variety of apples takes about 15 years. Another challenge that plant breeders face is that they can only transfer genes between closely related species. Even if there was, say, a very useful drought tolerance gene in oranges, it could never be transferred to apples by crossing. These two limitations of breeding can be bypassed by introducing genes into plant genome directly, either with agrobacterium or with a gene gun. A gene that is being introduced can be isolated from a related plant species, isolated from a completely different organism, or it can be designed on a computer and synthesized in a test tube. Agrobacterium tumefaciens is a soil microorganism that can naturally transfer some of its DNA into plant cells. In wild agrobacterium strains, this DNA, called transfer DNA, contains several genes that hijack plant biochemical pathways and make plant cells synthesize chemical compounds that agrobacterium uses for food. Using methods of molecular cloning, all bacterial genes on transfer DNA can be removed and replaced with the genes of interest. Agrobacterium then delivers these genes into plant nucleus, where they integrate into plant genome. Another technology widely used for plant transformation is a gene gun. Instead of inserting genes of interest into agrobacterium, the DNA is loaded on microscopic gold particles and is literally shot into plant cells. Some of the gold particles land in cell nuclei, and DNA from them gets inserted into plant chromosomes. Both agrobacterium and gene gun-mediated gene delivery is done in plant tissue culture, little clamps of plant cells that later on differentiate and grow into actual plants. So, in the form of breeding, genetic modification of plants has been practiced for thousands of years. Modern methods of gene technology make this process faster, more precise, and open to using genes from unrelated species.
What about myth number 2? We need to have genetically modified foods because this helps control weeds and pests, which in turn increase the yields we have from these crops. Well, true enough, this was one of the reasons why they genetically modified foods, so they can really grow large fields of one item or the other, and they are able to resist the herbicides that are being used to kill pests or to eradicate weeds. But as a matter of fact, this has increased the problem because there are now resistant weeds and resistant pests that have been evolving to really deal with this new crop, which is genetically modified. And this in turn has caused, again, loss in yield and causes a lot of more science that would go into it to really restore what we have lost. A third myth that GMOs are safe to eat. This is yet to be determined. There are no long-term studies that have shown the effectiveness or safety and their impact on health. Stay tuned, I'll give you more in the third segment. last segment of diet myths, and we're talking about today GMOs. We've established that there are no studies that really say whether they're safe or healthy as a long-term study. The short-term studies suggest that they are linked to some types of allergies, so the rise in number of people with allergies may be attributed to consumption of GMOs, and there are some studies that have shown that they may be linked to obesity and some endocrine-mediated pathways, so it may be linked to some types of chronic disease. Some mammalian studies, and not on humans, show that they have been linked to liver, bone, and kidney tumor. So again, the safety is not established, and maybe the short term is okay, but we can never predict the long term at this point of time. A fourth myth regarding the GMOs, that it says it's good for the environment. Well, I don't think so, because yes, with the herbicides that were reduced, or the resistance to these herbicides, this meant some kinds of plants and some even insects like bees and monarch butterflies have been in a way affected due to the eradication of some plants that were used for them when they wanted to breed. So again, it may not be really helpful for the ecosystems. So to sum up, the pros and cons. The pros, they may improve the yields, but that's again a short term. They can contribute to enhancing the color, brightness of the fruit or vegetable. It can be helpful to the environment in really living a bit longer, but they are not yet established to be safe or healthy. They have been linked to food allergies. They have been linked to different allergies actually. And the most important problem, they have no legislation regarding food labels, especially in countries like the US, for example. You buy a product, an apple or a banana or an orange or watermelon, and you don't know if it's genetically modified. China, Australia, and the European Commission have it mandatory to mention that the food is genetically modified. You have the right to know if you're eating genetically modified food, and then it's your choice. Thank you very much for being with us, and hope to see you in another episode.